Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Number 14 of Please Join Me. And we had such a great time with and so many stories from the award-winning lyricist Stephen Cole that we've decided to have him back to finish up talking about his career. I wanted to do it sooner rather than later. So Stephen, thank you again for joining us. And I want to ask something that I had hoped to ask you on the last episode, which is, tell me what you know of and what you're seeing of young people today who may be aspiring lyricists. Have any of them contacted you? Have you been able to mentor any of them, even on an unofficial basis? I'd like to hear your thoughts about folks who may want to write or are writing now in the theater, maybe, you know, the latest generation, if you will.
Right. Well, last year we took a little trip to LA and I wound up teaching a class on lyric writing, which I've always wanted to do because I thought, how did I learn? I learned from the masters. So I structured this class, which was only with about 5 or 6 people out in LA, and of all places to go, to Los Angeles to find theater lyric writers. But they were all interesting and at different levels, and I obviously began with Cole Porter, all the greats, Hammerstein, Lerner, Sondheim, the really great lyricists, and figured out, once again, dissecting what made them great. And then I gave them assignments, the kind of assignments that Layman Engel used to give in his Broadway songwriting classes at BMI, which was, he would say, write a song for Blanche Dubois in Streetcar Named Desire, and everyone would come in with a song for Blanche Dubois. I tried to find different ways of doing that. Sometimes it was a comedy song, sometimes it was a ballad, and so they would come in with their lyrics. And some of them, as I said, were on different levels. One guy was really writing a whole show. There was one woman who was a poet. And that was an interesting learning experience for her and for me and for the rest of the class, because she was never going to be a lyricist. A lyricist has to have words that sit on music. Becomes a marriage between words and music, and you shouldn't know where one leaves off and the other takes away. If a note is being stressed, then the word is being stressed. If the rhymes don't fall correctly and it's because of the music, then the lyricist also suffers. But being a poet, you don't have those kind of restrictions. Music is an absolute restriction, and many songs, as we know, are 32 bars, and they're dissected into 8-bar sections, and they have the same scans for 3 of those 4 sections. And bridges are important, and verses are important. But the lyricist just wrote pages and pages and pages of words. And it was trying to help her figure out what the form was. That was very, very challenging and also instructive to the other people. It turns out she'll never write a song, but she figured out what a song was. And so that was a very wonderful experience. And a few of them, one of the young women who was in the class has come to New York since then, is going to NYU, and she was very quirky and very different. And I'm looking forward to seeing what she does. And I see her on Facebook once in a while. But that was really the extent of working with lyricists, because it is hard. I have to say, I think you either got it or you ain't, as Rose would say. I think you either understand true rhymes, how it really works with music, or you don't. I knew it from the very beginning, or I couldn't have copied Cole Porter. Because you could say, here, take this book and copy Cole Porter. Figure out how to do that. If you don't have it in your soul already, if you don't hear, if your ear doesn't have an ear for rhyming, I think this is a question you haven't asked, but one of the problems with theater writers that I am seeing some theater writers today is they don't care about craft and rhyme. In fact, they are rebelling against it because pop music has changed the world, and it changed the world for the last 60 years, let's face it. And rhyming became old hat and old fashioned. And people like Yip Harburg, when you mention him, my God, he was so unique because he would make up his own words. He would make up ways of rhyming that was so clever and so funny and interesting. And I actually read there's a very big hit show that'll be coming back to Broadway when Broadway comes back. And the woman who wrote the lyrics literally said, well, I don't rhyme because I'm rebelling against the patriarchy. And I went, oh. The patriarchy, meaning Cole Porter and Larry Hart and all those people. But the fun is gone if you don't do it right. Number one, that's a big part of it. And also, an audience gets to hear a lyric one time. It's like a train that goes by. It's gone. And it's sitting on music, and it's got an orchestra going, and it's got lights, and it's got costumes. And if that lyric isn't crystal clear, and if the rhyme doesn't prick your ear in the right way, you will not understand one thing that is really going on. And that, to me, that's the problem that needs to be solved. And also, I go to the theater, certainly I always did, to go see a Sondheim show and sit there and you're having a meal of delicious rhymes and delicious words. And that's why we're there. A musical is not realistic. It is not something that is everyday occurrence. It's something special that we want that dessert. We want that whipped cream, and we want the meaning to come through. And I've sat in shows where the words just went right by me, and I'm a listener, and I really listen to every word, and I know it's because the craft isn't there. So yes, get me to give these people craft. I would love to mentor somebody, but it hasn't come up really. It hasn't really happened. Except in these classroom situations, which I enjoyed immensely because I love being the boss and telling them, this is how you have to do it. And if they rebel against that, well, that's their doing, and that's okay. Listen, I didn't become Cole Porter. I just learned how to do it well from Cole Porter, and I still aspire to be him.
When you talk about specific lyricists, like Lorenz Hart, and you talk about Yip Harburg, and you talk about Johnny Burke. And these people were poetic in their way, but they're also writing of places of longing, which I feel is gone so much today because everything's so instant, feelings of anticipation, feelings of loss. I mean, all of that whole range of human emotion, what makes us human, which I feel, unfortunately, today, in many ways is on the wane because of all this great technology, even what we're using right now. So I want you to talk a little bit about it, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were brilliant. Some of them were. They were in a different business. It was business. I mean, Berlin starting out as he did, that the sheet music business was, people had pianos in their houses. Everybody bought a piece of music. Show music, theater music went a level higher than the Tin Pan Alley world of just selling a song. And because songs in shows, even in the most early shows, somehow reflected the plot or somehow reflected the character. But they also knew that they could sell music and records. So those writers had two heads. One was for the show and one was for the sales. And so a Lorenz Hart and a Richard Rodgers would write a show called Connecticut Yankee and would have things like Thou Swell in it, which had the Old English, but they also made sure to have My Heart Stood Still, which was a glorious ballad that anybody could sing with a band. And so they were in the money business also. Berlin most definitely was. And he published all his own music. He was the first guy to do that. So their genius was on one head and their business was on another. And the business of America then was very different. As I said, they had pianos, and then they had radio, and then they had movies. And the movie people, people who were lucky enough to go out and write for the movies, were writing very specifically for an audience that was not very sophisticated. They were medium sophisticated because they had to go to the world of the rest of the country, the half of the country, you know, that is not New York and LA. And but you got Johnny Mercer out of that, and you got Harry Warren, and Berlin went back and forth. But the Berlin of the movies, who wrote Cheek to Cheek for Fred Astaire, and the Berlin of the theater, who wrote something like Louisiana Purchase about politics, were the same but different. They had different heads on them. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but I mean, they definitely had goals. And someone like Larry Hart came along in the 1920s, and no one had done the kind of intricate rhyming and fun stuff. And he loved getting away with sexual innuendo as much as he could in his lyrics. And he had a fun time. And the same with Ira Gershwin, and the same with Yip Harburg. They were people who dealt in words. The wordplay was important to them. And so if it translated to the public, which it did most of the time, but not always, all the better. But they also knew how to write a hit song. There's no such thing anymore as theater music being popular music. That diverged. Those two roads diverged as soon as rock and roll started to happen. And when you think about it, there haven't been hit songs from musicals really in a long, long time. You could have the biggest hit show and nobody really is going around singing anything from Hamilton now. They're not, you know, they know the whole score of the kids, but they don't know, it's not The Impossible Dream, and it's not Some Enchanted Evening. Of course, in the old days, someone like Richard Rodgers was a very wily guy. He wrote South Pacific, and he, the minute you heard Some Enchanted Evening, he knew he had a big hit song. And they reprised it 3 times in Act 2. You went home hearing that tune in the overture, and the entr'acte, in the 3 reprises, and that doesn't happen anymore. That Sondheim, who is, to me, you know, like the last great of the 20th century, and he's still alive, thank goodness, but he's not really writing. He felt he was freed up by having no hit songs. He had Send in the Clowns, that was his biggest hit song, which only happened years after A Little Night Music ran on Broadway. But he said, by not having to write hit songs, it just makes you write a better show. And we can't sit around going, oh, well, that's going to be a hit song, because it isn't. It's almost never going to happen. So as a show writer, you just write the best possible show you can and hope for the best there. But there's no more Hello Dollies. There's just not going to happen. I mean, if Louis Armstrong hadn't come along, you know, and recorded that song, or people, we're so lucky that Barbra Streisand was Barbra Streisand. They tried to cut that song, people, from Funny Girl 3 times. And Julie Stein said, you can't cut that song. And they said, why? It doesn't really work in that spot. He said, you can't cut that song because she's going to record it and it's going to be a million sellers. That's why. And that's why it was stayed in the show.
You talk about Julie Stein, there's that great story. Just one more little Merman story where, what was it? I guess it was Gypsy, and they were talking about who was going to write the music. They had Sondheim.
Yes.
Right? And she said, she didn't want to trust him, right? She said, get me someone who can write songs. Get me Julie Stein. Is that a true story so far as you know?
I mean, he did want to write music and lyrics. He had only done West Side Story lyrics. And she didn't trust him. No, she didn't trust him because she had done a show called Happy Hunting with 2 guys named Doobie and Carr, and they were rude and awful to her.
Now, before we wrap up, I want you to introduce one of your songs, and we're going to play it. And I mean, it's an honor, really, to have your song on my podcast. And I want you to set it up a little, tell everybody about it.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites because, well, It's newish, and you always like your newer songs. It's called Taking the Veil, and it's from Merman's Apprentice, music by David Evans, and sung by the great Clea Blackhurst. And when you hear her, she plays Merman in the show, and people said to me, how are you going to ever get to play Ethel Merman in your musical? And I said, you just wait. And I knew Clea could do it. She's amazing. But the song in the show is a lesson to the little girl who wants to be a Broadway star and thinks it's going to be easy and fun, and every day we'll go out late at night after the show and we'll gab and we'll drink and we'll eat. And Ethel says, oh no, you have to understand, when I do a show, it's a steak and baked potatoes. I do the show and I don't talk for the next day. It is taking the veil. And she had said this on a Merv Griffin show. She said, when I do a show, it's like taking the veil. And once she said it, I knew I had a title. And that's exactly, talk about Ira Gershwin. He said in his book, a title is vital. Once you've it, prove it. And that's how you figure out a song. And that title led me to write about what it is like to do a show 8 times a week for years and years and years and still survive. And that's taking the veil.
Okay, folks, now we're going to hear Taking the Veil from Stephen Cole's show, Merman's Apprentice, music by David Evans, lyrics by Stephen Cole, and let's listen in.
Muriel, how do you think I got through 40 years of 8 shows a week? Being a Broadway star, it's not a job, it's a calling. It's like taking the veil. 8 shows you show without fail. No matter how you may feel, you show or the show is a failure. It's like taking a vow. 8 shows you show and you bow. You give your all, that's the deal, no matter what happens to ail ya. Yes, you give up a lot every day just to get through each night till you're done. To them, you're a luminous star, but what you are, kid, is a nun. You're alert on day 1 and dead by day 4. So Muriel, baby, beware what you pray for. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm happy belting a song. But by Saturday night, your belt starts to tighten, your knuckles get white, and you wail. But if you can just stay awake till you go home and make your Saturday supper and break out the mail, you recover on Sunday and start again Monday. Taking the veil, taking the veil.
But there's gotta be more. What about all the glamour, the people at the stage door?
Oh, sure. You exit at 11, you say goodnight to Max. The crowd's been there since 10, and not one has got a pen. Still you smile as the mob attacks. Oh, Miss Merman, you were great, you were swell. You say thank you, but you know you were great. You were swell, yeah, but they didn't even see the show. And the ink gets on your fingers, but you sign until you're blue. Then they all want a picture, a handshake, a kiss, and what do you get? Their flu. Your standby goes on as a fill-in while you have to take penicillin, and the grosses go down as you're blowing your nose. The producer has conniptions and he threatens to close. So before you are well, though it's hell, you come back to the show, 'cause you know that if you're a hit, then you're a slave and that's it. If you're signed for a year, you make it appear that you're fresh when it's clear that you're stale. So just try to get through the week without having to speak. kid, this isn't the life for the meek or the frail, but it's the world that you covet, so you better love it. Taking the veil, good reviews are all baloney. When Mary Martin wins the Tony, what's life in the theater, my dear? It's taking the veil.
Stephen, that was wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you, and thank you, J Records, for recording it, and Clea Blackhurst, and that incredible band at Birdland. Oh my God, I just think it sounds like an orchestra, and I'm just so thrilled we got to do that. Thank you, Joe, for this whole time.
Oh, please. I mean, it's fascinating. And as I've hoped to do, I wanted to open up my program to folks in the greater community, greater arts community. I've had a number of jazz musicians. I know them well, and it was comfortable for me to start with them. But I've also had something of a career in the theater, and I know a lot of folks from that world. So I was looking forward to having you on. And thank you for coming back and making time for this second interview with Stephen Cole. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Joe Traina, and this has been Please Join Me, and my guest, the wonderful, witty, interesting, fascinating, talented Stephen Cole, the lyricist and the author, and his resume reads like a who's who and a dream for anyone who has ever hoped to be part of the arts, the theater, the writing community. Oh boy, I can't say enough. And I wish you well always, and especially in these challenging times. And you take care of yourself, and I'll see you around the Rialto.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Please Join Me with Joe Traina. Be sure to listen anywhere you get your podcasts. Keep up with joetrainamusic.com for news and new episodes. You can listen to Joe's latest recording, Tip of the Hat, on all major streaming services and wherever fine music is sold. This episode was produced by Caroline Voigt.